Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by SpeedStream. I'm Jim Cardle. He started off as a Bexar County Commissioner and has been representing the 21st Congressional District of Texas in Congress. As a conservative leader, has been chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and is now chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. We're pleased to be able to visit with Congressman Lamar Smith today. Congressman, how are you?
Fine, Jim. Always good to be with you and your viewers as well.
Well, we appreciate you coming in first off, and you are in the middle of your August recess, quote unquote,
Right.
where legislators leave because it's so hot in August up in Washington. But real quick, before we get into any specific issues, you've been hearing from your constituents. What are folks asking you about these days?
I of course, try to interact with as many constituents as I can during our break, and we also have telephone town meetings, and I'm calling hundreds of constituents and soliciting their views in that regard as well. But I think probably the top three issues, I'm not sure in which order here, would be trying to defund Obamacare and replace it with something that works. Probably concern about what we're going to do in Syria, what steps to take there, and immigration, of course. We go back and possibly we'll be voting on some immigration bills on the House floor in October, and people are curious as to what's going to go on in that regard. And then people are also continue to be concerned about the National Security Agency and how much information they've been gathering on American citizens who have nothing to do with terrorism. And so those are the kind of subjects that come up on a regular basis.
Well, let's see how many of those we can tick off here real quick. First, of course, it's breaking by the minute almost, is the situation in the Middle East and Syria. What are you hearing, at least while you're on recess? Is there going to be congressional approval? Do people agree with President Obama about the rumored strikes there? What are your thoughts?
Well, the president, as he should be doing, is starting to talk now to members of Congress and congressional leaders about what his thoughts are. I think a lot of us still have questions. Number one, we have to know beyond a doubt that chemical weapons have been used before we take any further action. We also need to have a purpose. Just to go in and with a quick military strike that doesn't really result in anything significant is not necessarily the best way to proceed either. What we do know is both under the Constitution and under the War Powers Act, the president needs to consult with Congress and get Congress's approval. So I think it's within 60 days, if military forces are sent into a country, he has to come back and get Congress's approval. That has not always been done in the past, but needs to be done.
You represent a district with a lot of military presence down there. I'm sure there's a great amount of focus. How about the idea or the concept that this might be something? Is it a bit of a diversion? Is it a real issue? We've got worldwide conflicts going on constantly. Does this reach the level of concern in your mind?
Yes, it does. And we're, by the way, involved, of course, in Afghanistan and Iraq, and now we're thinking about Syria.
Right.
And it does make you wonder, with all the things that are not going right in this country, if this is a distraction or not. I hope not. But Obamacare, as it's being unveiled and implemented, is not working right. A lot of the deadlines have been missed. It's been postponed for businesses. In my view, it ought to be postponed for individuals as well. Everything we were told about Obamacare practically has not been true. We were told it was going to reduce costs. We were going to be able to keep our health care plan if we liked it. We would be able to go to the physician. We're seeing now if we wanted to. None of that is necessarily the case. And even after Obamacare is implemented, the Congressional Budget Office says 30 million people are still not going to be covered. So there's a better way to have health care, and we need to try to achieve that as quickly as we can. But, with the distractions of Syria, and if they are involving chemical weapons, that is as serious as it can be. We're just going to have to wait and see what the president decides to do. But as I say, no matter what, he needs to consult with and sooner or later get approval by Congress.
Okay, you mentioned Obamacare. Let's jump into that real quick, because I know you've got the budget, the fiscal year approaching, and there has been a lot of our own Senator Ted Cruz mounting a national campaign to defund Obamacare. What are the chances? What's the next steps? Is this realistic to be thinking about how to address the implementation of Obamacare?
Certainly, we should never stop trying to defund or repeal Obamacare. And we have good ideas on how to replace it. I mean, people do need to be able to get health insurance no matter what their situation. They need to be able to take it with them from job to job. We need to reduce cost. There are ways to do that without having the government take over the entire health care delivery system. And so Senator Cruz, wish him well. I don't think he has the votes yet in the Senate, and that's by his own admission, but he's certainly undertaken a worthy effort, and we need to do everything we can to stop it, and I hope there are the votes there to do it.
Speaking of the votes, when you go back, the fiscal year of the nation begins October 1. I believe that leaves 4 weeks. I know you're not working every one of those days in the legislative session up there, but what's the outlook for a fiscal cliff? We can't depend on the White House, obviously, who hasn't delivered a budget in years. What's the fiscal outlook for the next month, if you would?
The government's going to run out of money mid-October, we're now told, so we have to do something. We might pass a continuing resolution to keep the government operating as it is now until we get to the point where we have an actual vote on whether or not to raise the debt limit.
And a continuing resolution, again, is just
it's status quo. It just keeps the government running under the current...
For 60 days
For
or
60
something.
days under the current level of funding.
Okay.
And then when we get to that debt limit vote, that's where we think everything comes to a head, and that's the crossroads. And we hope the president will work with us to try to reduce excessive spending, try to keep taxes low, try to keep the government running in a way that is responsive to the American people and doesn't overburden them, and so on. So we're hopeful. We don't know what's going to happen when we get to that vote. I'm opposed to increasing our debt limit unless we get a lot in return for doing so.
Talk about, if you would, the dynamics, because we've got you all in the House and Speaker Boehner controlled by the Republicans, in the Senate controlled by the Democrats, Leader Reid over there. What are the dynamics of getting anything done, frankly, right now, not to mention the budget?
Jim, that is the real problem. And we're coming at the budget from almost opposite directions. The House has passed a budget, no new net increase in taxes, and we get to a balanced budget in 10 years. The Senate has passed a budget which is $1 trillion in new taxes, and after 10 years, the deficit is still $500 billion. How do you reconcile those two different views? I mean, I'm in the camp of we need to balance the budget. Clearly, the Senate doesn't care about balancing the budget. They don't think it's necessary. So that's the huge gap, the huge gulf that separates the House and the Senate right now, and that's what all those discussions in the next 2 months are going to be about.
So a lot of some more cheap entertainment there.
Yes.
Folks, I want to thank you for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. Again, we're visiting with Chairman Lamar Smith from San Antonio, Chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. And Congressman, one final question, if I can, regarding that committee, because you oversee NASA, you oversee the EPA, FEMA. Last time you were in, you mentioned that you're really trying to dig into the EPA's regulatory affairs. And I know you're trying to issue a subpoena or get warrants. Bring us up to speed, if you would, on what your efforts are.
We just issued the first subpoena by the Science Committee in 21 years, and I felt that was necessary because the EPA has refused to give us the data that they rely upon to issue these costly regulations that are costing individuals and businesses tens of billions of dollars. They've told us they were going to give it to us. The new EPA head herself said she would give us the data so that we can analyze it and make sure it's good science. They still did not give it to us. We wrote 5 letters. They didn't give it to us. So we issued a subpoena. Now they're talking, so we hope to get that information. It needs to be made public. The American people need to know what data the EPA is relying upon to issue these expensive regulations.
And this is their clean science, all the administrative orders, the regulations that don't pass through the House or the Senate and legislation, but it's the regulation.
Yeah, these are the regulations that burden businesses, cost the American people a lot of money. A lot of them have to do with the environment, and that's well and good. If they can justify it, that's fine. But we think they're using data that's out of date, 30 years old. The fact that they won't make it public makes us very suspicious as to whether the data really justifies their actions. That's what we want to get at.
Well, I suspect your constituents and numerous Texans appreciate your suspicion there. And we, by the way, appreciate your coming in very much. We're going to be respectful of your time and let you get out the door to meet more constituents. Folks, we appreciate you joining us again today for another edition of Texas Insider with Congressman Lamar Smith. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Anytime, Jim. Good to be with you.
Remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.